to realize our shared vision for a better world. So today, Academia 2063, through the Malabo Montpellier panel, is taking action by convening a distinguished panel of high-level policy leaders to tackle the question, what do the outcomes of the United Nations Food Systems Summit mean for African food systems transformation? Ladies and gentlemen, dear partners and friends of Academia 2063, thank you for joining us for this session. My name is Layi Butake, Academia 2063, Director of Communication and Outreach, and I am honored to be in your presence today. To kick this off, I will now invite Academia 2063's chairperson. He is equally the co-chair of the Malabo Montpellier panel, Dr. Ousmane Badiane.
Thank you, Layi. Thank you very much. And on behalf of our co-sponsors of this event, the African Union Commissions, IFAD, and the African Development Bank, welcome to those who are joining us. Your Excellency, Commissioner Joseph Asako, Prime Minister Hailemariam Desalegn, Minister Robin Lowe, Permanent Secretary Claude Musaviemana, and our other guests and speakers, Dr. Beth Dunford, Maura Boyle, Barry Boyle, Dr. Liz Kirk. It's a pleasure to welcome you here, as well as Dr. Agnes Calibata, who's going to be represented by Alison Kynes. I would extend a warm welcome to Ambassador Etherin Cousin, who's going to be moderating the session here later today. Thank you to all of you, and of course, thank you to my co-chair, Professor Dr. Joachim von Braun, and the Malabo Montpellier panel team at Imperial College, at University of Bonn, and Academia 2063. We wanted with this event to follow up promptly after the summit, with all the efforts that have gone into it, the dialogues, the work of the science group, the work of civil society, everyone that has helped us rethink the trajectory we still have to go all the way to 2030 to address the many challenges we still have around food systems. For Africa in particular, after 2 solid decades of growth, this is a good time to look back and see what have we achieved and what else do we have to do still moving forward to deal with the issues and the challenges we have around the Food System Summit. The action areas are a good way of focusing our attention and trying to understand what the agenda might look like here in Africa. Nourishing all people will require a strong agricultural sector, a productive agricultural sector that can grow and produce the food supplies to contribute to meeting feed demands for African populations and the globe as a whole. So a strong and productive agriculture sector is going to be extremely important for all of us. Boosting nature-based solutions of production brings our attention back again to a changing climate and the need to sustain fertility of soil, health of ecosystems, to make sure that we can sustain strong growth of the productive base. And nowhere is this more urgent than in Africa, where climate change is having major impact and where our preparedness to deal with climate change is less than in many other parts of the world. The area advanced equitable livelihoods, decent works, and empowered communities is another area where I think it's good for us in Africa to be reminded of the importance of the issues around here. 2 decades of faster growth has not reached everyone. So we'll need to find a way of including more of those who are marginalized, those who are excluded, to make sure that everybody can share in that growth, and that we have the safety nets, that we have the understanding of the vulnerability, that we have the tools and the mechanisms to make sure that everybody is on board and is sharing in that growth. We talked about resilience to vulnerabilities, shocks and stresses when I was talking about area 2. Here as well, there's a lot that needs to be done on the continent. So we think the summit came at a good time as we're getting prepared to think about the last few years of the Malabo agenda and the last decade of the SDGs, to take stock, to reflect, and again, figure out what we need to do. We could not have a better team around us here to help us do that, to kickstart that discussion as we shape the African agenda. So I would like to stop here and thank everybody who joined us here today. I know your times are very precious, but I think your presence here also a signal to us of how important these issues are that we're talking about here. Thank you very much, and I yield over back to Lai.
Thank you very much, Dr. Badian, for your remarks. We recall that we need more inclusion for more sustained growth. Now we will listen to a keynote from the Commissioner, African Union Commission's Department of Agriculture, Rural Development, Blue Economy, and Sustainable Development, Her Excellency Josepha Lionel Correa Sacco. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you for giving me the floor. Good afternoon from Addis Ababa. Good morning, good evening, depending on where you are connected to. Let me first of all acknowledge the presence of His Excellency Haile Mariam Desalegn, former Prime Minister of the Republic of Ethiopia and the chairman of AGRA. You're welcome, Excellency, to our meeting. I would also like to recognize the presence of the Minister of Malawi. I think we were together this morning in one of the functions, one of the webinars that we had. If I'm not too tired, I think it was today or yesterday we were together. So distinguished honorable ministers, and I also like to recognize my dear friend, Professor Joachim Vondram. You're welcome. And my dear brother, Usman Badian, and all the distinguished delegates and invitees, ladies and gentlemen, and all protocol duly observed. My warmest greeting to everyone participating in this event. Allow me to also extend warm regards and best wishes from His Excellency Musa Faki Mahamat, the chairperson of the African Union Commission, who really sees this agenda as a priority during his tenure. It gives me pleasure to address you all on the implication of the post-food system summit outcome on Africa. As Dr. Usman said it rightly, we just finished that food system summit. Now we need to reflect and we need to implement the outcome of this important summit. There's a lot that we identify, and mostly with the COVID-19 pandemic, things have changed. To build back better, we took into account a lot of game-changing issues that we really need to look and start speeding our action after the summit, so that we can keep the momentum that we started 19 months ago. Let me take this opportunity to once again, it's a pity my sister is not there, but you can transmit to her, congratulate Dr. Agnes Calibata, the UN Special Envoy for the mobilization, the engagement, the coordination, and astute leadership that culminated into a successful food system summit on the 23rd of September 2021, after 18 months of intensive engagement and dialogue, mostly here in our continent. We really did very well there because we had very fruitful dialogues and discourse all over the team. This effort led to the identification of game-changing solutions to transform the food system across the globe. Notable were the proposed action and progress towards the 2030 Sustainable Development Goal, the SDGs. Commendable were the highly consultative and inclusive process which created an open and broad public discourse regarding the relationship between food system and the SDGs. The principles that were developed to guide member states and other entities towards using their food system to achieve SDG cannot be ignored. For this, Africa is proud of our sister Calibata that really did a very good job. And we are all after her, we all supported her, and we believe that we have to support each other as African principles. We need to support each other, and it was really a very good exercise, and we will have to continue in this dynamic. As you may all be recalled, Africa presented a common position to the UNFSS, whose narrative was guided by the current challenges related to feeding the growing population amidst the environmental footprint of global agriculture, worsening climate crisis, and deepening inequality amplified by the uncertainty of the COVID-19 pandemic. The Africa Common Position provides an aggregated of views on key issues that will shape Africa's food system over the next decades. Over the next decade on resilience in the face of growing vulnerability, shocks, and stress on the continent. The African Common Position, which is anchored in the CADEP as the framework for agricultural transformation in Africa, underscores the role of food system transformation in facilitating the achievement of all the 20 goals of Agenda 2063. In this context, the development of the second 10 years implementation plan of Agenda 2063, because we are finishing the Agenda the first development, the first 10 years implementation plan for Agenda 2063 in 2025, that is 4 years to come. Then we will be the second 10 years implementation of this agenda will be informed by the analysis and implementation consideration for the food system goal. So we are going to really use those 43 game-changing that we identify in our common position to build upon a very sustainable second 10 years implementation plan of Agenda 2063. The formulation of the AU CADEP Malabo Business Plan 2022-2025 is taking into consideration the solution in the African Common Position as well. A conversation has also started with key actors and the stakeholders to align the SDGs of 2030 on the one hand, and on the other hand, the CADEP biannual review indicators to the food system indicators. Awareness creation about the African Common Position is also critical for buying and the planning for collective action. To this end, in the margin of the 39th ordinary session of the Executive Council and within the framework of the third mid-year coordination meeting between the African Union and the Regional Economic Community, I held a press conference briefing to disseminate information and popularize the African Common Position. This was also geared towards deepening political commitment to fast-track the implementation of CADEP and ensure alignment, harmonization, and coordination of the post-UNFSS initiative and activity of stakeholders and partners with the priority of member states as defined in the National and Regional Agriculture and Food Security Investment Plans. Relatively, the Commission will continue to strengthen integrated policy making, inter-ministerial collaboration, and private sector engagement has a cornerstone for food system transformation. You may wish to recall that on 27 July 2020, together with FAO, the African Union Commission co-organized a virtual meeting of ministers in charge of agriculture, trade, and finance of African Union member states under the theme Building Resilience Food System through Agricultural Trade and Investment to Achieve Food and Nutrition Security in Africa. There is also need to undertake joint resource mobilization to support the implementation of the ongoing initiative and develop new ones specific to the outcome of the United Nations Food System Summit in pursuit of resilience and inclusive food system. Therefore, facilitating and brokering technical and investment partnership is among the priority of the African Union Commission. In addition, development and adoption of multi-sectoral system approaches and decision-making tools and guidelines are imperative in transforming African food system, strengthening and aligning supportive data management system and the linkage to homegrown science, technology, and innovation will come into focus under these components. Then I invite academians to really come and work with us in all these areas that we are identified so that we can have solid data collection on the continent. Finally, monitoring and reporting on the progress in implementation of the pathway of the African Common Position and globally will be important. Fortunately for Africa, we already have the CADEP biannual review process. We shall review it to accommodate the need of the food system tracking and reporting. And we can share with the rest of the world our experience running a continent-wide tracking and reporting system. Thank you for your kind attention as we embark on the road for building back better. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Joseph Asako, for setting the tone for this conversation. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. So how do we connect the dots? How do we leverage synergies? And what are the next steps? It is my honor to welcome His Excellency Haile Mariam Desalegn. He is the former Prime Minister of Ethiopia, and he's equally the co-chair of the Malabo Montpellier Forum. Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Facilitator. Your Excellency and dear sister, Ambassador Joseph Asako, and Your Excellency, Minister Lobin, and Your Excellency, also Permanent Secretary Musa Beamana, and Professor Von Braun, Dr. Diane, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. Africa's food system are impacted by many external and internal factors, natural hazards and intense climatic events, and socioeconomic shocks, including the COVID-19 pandemic, and conflicts are exacerbating food insecurity, severely eroding livelihoods, and jeopardizing the economic growth achieved over the past 2 decades. I cannot stress the impact of climate change on our food systems and our economies more strongly. Persistent and intense droughts that have cost Africa around $372 billion since 2014. The 2019-20 locust outbreak destroyed more than 356,000 tons of cereals in my country and nearly 1.5 million hectares of crop and pasture in Ethiopia alone. Some projections estimate that nearly 13 million people face high level of acute food insecurity from January to June 2021, despite humanitarian food assistance, including about 2.6 million in emergency. These are only a glimpse into the recent impacts. Temperature in Ethiopia have already risen by 1.3 degrees centigrade between 1960 and 2006. I cannot fathom what will happen if we see a 2 degrees centigrade increase or worse, as estimated by the UN only a few days ago of 2.7 degrees centigrade. Africa is at the forefront of climate impacts, and a few sectors are more vulnerable than our food and agriculture. I think we have to act and act now. As we engage with the climate community over the next 2 weeks through the COP26 process, I hope that we will continue to emphasize the need for developed, wealthy countries to deliver on their promises to reduce emissions and also to provide at least the promised US $100 billion to adapt to these impacts. We were engaging with these wealthy countries, but I think we shouldn't lose hope. We have to continue struggling. These threats, overly existing, and unique set of circumstances that Africa faces. Africa's population is expected to grow to 2.5 billion by 2050. A large share of this will be young people, energetic and more educated. They will all be looking for well-paid and meaningful and decent jobs. Not only will we be eating more, we will also be eating differently, including more animal products. I think our food systems approach has shown us that we shouldn't only focus on agriculture, but also nutrition. Not only will our food systems have to produce more nutrient-dense food, they will also have to support livelihoods, all the while preserving the environment. Sustainability is a big question. The shocks and challenges faced by Africa stress the need to increase resilience through integrated agricultural markets for cost-effective and nutritious solutions. Rural development will be central to sustainability, transforming Africa's food systems, as will a more competitive and efficient food and agricultural sector, one which taps into regional and global markets and meet dietary preferences and nutritional needs while preserving our environmental resource base. While the efforts to raise productivity largely paid off in reducing hunger and malnutrition over the past decade, as we are doing in Agra as well, we now have to adopt a more holistic, systematic approach to dealing with these challenges. A systems perspective helps identify spillover effects, trade-offs, and synergies across the dimensions of the triple challenge of food and nutrition security, decent jobs and incomes, and environmental sustainability. Raising productivity sustainably, for example, can reduce resource stress and can result in a positive environmental outcomes, while diversifying production can benefit diets, environmental sustainability, and the resilience. Expanding the use of agro-processing can benefit producers by creating a ready market, reducing post-harvest losses, enabling the consumption of a more diversified diet, and allowing for greater inclusivity within value chains. Agro-processing facilitates, however, require a reliable energy and water supply. Without especially rural energy supply from green and renewable sources, they may also contribute to localized, it's not possible, and they may also contribute to localized pollution, which we have seen also in many Asian countries. I think if they are not regulated well, can contribute towards worsening dietary outcomes and environmental deterioration, as seen by some emerging economies, as I said. Ladies and gentlemen, there is neither one single policy nor a unique mix of strategies that can deliver change across all objectives of food system. It is a complex process and requires complex solutions involving multiple sectors, industries, and the stakeholders working in partnership and leveraging synergies for win-win solutions. I know for sure that African countries have already begun joining the dots on their food and agricultural policies, as our able commissioner just said. It is a complex process and requires complex solutions. In fact, we know that Rwanda and Malawi are among those countries that are working to develop more comprehensive solutions to food and nutrition security within their countries. I look forward to hearing more about what they plan to do next. We have the minister and the permanent secretary with us. We can learn from each other on what has worked and what hasn't. Lessons can be drawn from the most effective strategies and policies in several African countries, promising successful solutions that are adaptable to suit the country context. I now thank you for your attention, and God bless you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, Haile Mariam Desalegn, for your intervention. We appreciate your participation in this session. And now I will welcome Professor Joachim von Braun. He is our co-chair for the Malabo Montpellier panel from the Center for Development Research, Bonn University. Professor von Braun, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Your Excellency Josefa Sacco, Your Excellency Haile Mariam, your introductory remarks were very, very important, emphasizing the common position of Africa, as you did, Ambassador Sacco, emphasizing the broadening food system agenda, as you did, Excellency Haile Mariam. I join you and the whole community here on this important webinar to welcome you in my role as co-chair with Usman Badiane. I have recognized that, Usman, you have welcomed already the panelists, which will be chaired ably by the esteemed global food policy expert, Ambassador Özerine Kadın. So I second what you said and do not repeat. We had a number of very important preparatory meetings in Africa, which I simply want to recall. There was one by the Malabo Montpellier panel. There was one by FARA. And Usman, you chaired an important meeting hosted by the government of Morocco with political leaders. So I applaud all these initiatives, and I assure you the African voices have been heard in the summit process. I can say so because I was at the receiving end as chair of the scientific group advising on the summit content. I also want to echo what Ambassador Josefa Sacco said about the key role Agnes Calibata played for the success of the summit, and the Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed, originally from Nigeria. So the agenda shaped at the summit is guiding into the future. What did the Secretary General say in his statement of action? He made 5 points. Number one, nourish all people with a focus on healthy diet and ending hunger. Number two, boost nature-based solutions with productivity and science. Number three, advance equitable livelihoods, decent work, and empowered communities. Number four, building resilience to vulnerabilities, shocks, and stresses. And that, of course, includes the climate agenda, which you, Haile Mariam, just underlined. But it also includes the issue of food insecurity and hunger in the context of conflicts, of armed conflicts. And fifth, he emphasized accelerating the means of implementation. What does this mean? Accelerating the means of implementation. I only want to talk about that and not of the content of the other four, because now we are in the process of implementation. Implementation is emphasized by the summit outcome must happen at the country level and at the African regional level. Implementation at the country and regional level is central. I quote again from the Secretary General's statement, progress will require local and global communities of practice and stakeholders coming together with national governments. In particular, support to enhance implementation through financing, data, science and innovation, governance and trade. These are topics very close to the capabilities of Academia 2063 and the Malabo Montpellier panel. We need now practical steps for the mobilization of the finance agenda with development partners, but also with the private sector. And we need to do two things, which I would mention in closing. Each African country may consider forming a cluster of all science and innovation organizations in its vicinity, such as the academies of sciences, the universities, the national agricultural research systems, colleges, the knowledge carriers in the extension services, and to support evidence-based follow-up actions. I believe that the Malabo Montpellier panel and Academia 2063 can support these networks, support them with quantitative analyses, modeling, and so on. It's a technical agenda. We need to be technically sound in the implementation process. And secondly, the African region, and in particular the African Union, may consider engaging in the international science and policy interface regarding food, to share the African experiences internationally and to benefit from global opportunities related to the global follow-up topics, which are not just country by country, but global: trade, climate adaptation, science exchange, and health. Especially the climate topic requires our persistence. I quote the heading in closing. I quote the heading of an article which President Tshisekedi articulated earlier this week in an internationally published newspaper. Africa is tired to wait, was his heading. That sounds depressing. It was a very constructive article by President Tshisekedi. About half of it emphasized the role of food and agriculture in the climate adaptation agenda and the climate agenda. We need to raise our voice in support of that. Thank you for your attention.
Very strong recommendations there from Professor Joachim von Braun. Thank you so much, Professor, for those remarks. And this brings us to the end of part one of our session. We are just about a few minutes ahead of time, but right on time. Thank you so all for your kind attention. Special thank you to all our keynote speakers, Her Excellency Joseph Sako, His Excellency Halimariam Desalegn, Professor von Braun, and Dr. Usman Badian. Right now, we are going to take just 5 minutes, just enough time to get a stretch and maybe refill your glass of water before we resume for the second part of our conversation, where we will be having a very insightful panel conversation moderated by Ambassador Etherin Cousin. Remember, this meeting is being translated. If you need the translation function, simply click on the globe icon on your screen. Thank you so much, and see you in 5 minutes.
So let's slowly welcome everybody back. So we're gonna get started. So Lai, you want to then call us back to
Yes,
session?
So at some point, we will request that you turn on your video so we can capture a group picture. We'll let you know once we're all set. So if you're just joining us, welcome to this high-level policy conversation organized by Academia 2063 through the Malabo Montpellier panel. And we are discussing what the outcomes of the United Nations Food Systems Summit mean for African food systems transformation. We are now moving to the second part of this conversation, which will begin with some opening remarks from Dr. Agnes Calibata, who is the UN Secretary General Special Envoy to the UN 2021 Food Systems Summit and the President of the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa. She is represented by Alison Cairns, who is Partnerships Lead at the UN Food Systems Summit 2021. If Ms. Cairns is ready, the floor is yours.
Great. Well, look, thank you very much for that introduction, and apologies again that unfortunately Agnes, a Special Envoy for the UN Food Systems Summit, has been unable to join this session, but she did want me to share her thoughts and contribution to. So firstly, to appreciate the organisers, the Malabo Montpellier panel, the African Union, IFAD, and also AFDB. She also wanted to recognise the leadership that these partner organisations have really brought to create this session, but also to recognise the way in which Africa as a continent, a region, came forward and showed up at the Food Systems Summit by bringing about a common position, and to thank these organisations for that support to bring that common position about. She's very clear that Africa has a stake in a transformed food system, not least because the African food system is fragile, and that was exposed with COVID-19, but with other risks and shocks. But also the fact that that Africa has one of the highest levels of hunger and malnutrition, with over 100 million Africans facing catastrophic food insecurity. But more broadly, for the world, hunger is on the rise, affecting almost 10 billion people on this planet, and more than 2 billion suffer from malnutrition. At the same time, what Agnes sees is that Africa has very much got an opportunity here, and it's an opportunity for a number of reasons. Firstly, the population, very strong sort of youth population, and also the role of women. And also, finally, the fact that 2/3 of the world's uncultivated arable land is in Africa. And this presents a huge opportunity for Africa to be a solution, not just to feed itself, but also to contribute to feeding the world. And she feels that that has been strongly represented in the common position that was brought forward. I would like to turn to some of the outcomes of the Food Systems Summit to share with you, and some of the next steps and what this means for Africa. So firstly, I think we definitely managed to achieve an elevated discourse on food systems, and to make food systems politically relevant and back on the agenda for all countries. We also, I think, managed to successfully bring in traditional actors to this conversation, but also hopefully new actors and those that are more marginalized in terms of bringing them around the table. And we want that to continue and provide that space for that ongoing inclusive dialogue and action. The Secretary General's chair summary and statement of action identified 5 areas that emerged from the summit process. Those involved in that summit process, in terms of, if you like, areas of convergence from the different sort of dimensions of the summit itself. So the work that Professor Van Braun took forward with the scientific group, the work of the action tracks, the work of the levers of change, the dialogues that have taken place in many countries around the world, as well as the independent dialogues and the work and the insights and contributions from the Champions Network, and also from the various constituencies that have engaged in the process. And they've kind of convened, if you like, or coalesced around 5 different areas. Firstly, nutrition for all people. That includes the sort of end hunger challenge, but also brings in sustainable consumption. Boosting nature-based solutions is number 2. Number 3, the third area, advancing equitable livelihoods, decent work, and empowered communities. Building resilience to vulnerability, shocks, and stress. And then finally, one that was emerged quite strongly is around supporting the means of implementation. This is important because it's great to have these action areas, but you need the means to actually implement it. And so this action area was highlighted as part of the summit work. A few other items that emerged, outcomes from the summit, which are important to know. Firstly, we created a food systems compendium. It's online, it's really the work of the summit, and it's a very useful resource. It also has policy briefs. It also has about more than 2,000 different solutions that are contained within the compendium as well. And we want that to be a live and evolving document. Overall, we had about 165 member states, including 78 heads of state and government, make statements at the summit, talking about the importance of food systems. And it's been commented upon a number of times that heads of state and ministers were talking about food systems. And by that, it really is putting it on the political agenda. About 103 national pathways for food system transformation have been logged so far as part of the summit work. And the challenge now is really converting that into action on the ground and encouraging more to come forward. Member states, they talked about, international and regional cooperation. Again, this came out really strongly, and I think plays into the approach from the summit to make this a people's summit, to make it an inclusive summit, because we need the whole ecosystem to really deliver a transformed food system. And that was resonated in member states' words. Food security came up, addressing COVID, as you'd expect. Climate change mitigation and adaptation and improving nutrition were other strong themes that particularly emerged during the summit process. But also supporting small and family farmers and rural populations, and increasing investment came out very strongly. We had a number of other outcomes which will help build the momentum, will keep the momentum going long past the Food System Summit and through a lot of the other global mechanisms and work that we have to do collectively. We had bold commitments made by all food system actors. We had particularly a number of big financial commitments, including the 10 billion from the United States government. We also had over 900 million from Bill and Melinda Gates. So commitments from all different types of actors as well. We had many multi-stakeholder initiatives and coalitions and communities of purpose that have also been catalyzed as part of this summit, and they really will form support mechanisms to help the countries implement their national and regional pathways. In total, we had over 200 global commitments have been posted on our register, and that is growing by the day. We've also had strong declarations from communities, of private sector declaration, a producer declaration, a youth declaration, and an indigenous peoples, so white paper. So truly inclusive. In terms of, I'll just turn quickly to the next steps. we need a follow-up and review mechanism, and that's what the Secretariat is also consulting on at the moment. What does that follow-up and review mechanism look like going forward? And we will have, which will be operational from January onwards, there will be a food system coordination hub to help with that implementation on the ground for the national pathways, as well as leveraging that broader ecosystem for that wider sort of constituency group that have been so critical to the success of the summit process. But what does this mean for Africa? Because we want, and Agnes is very clear, wants Africa to remain part of the solution to these global challenges around food system transformation and what that has to offer. She feels that we need to step up support to countries in Africa and ensure that we are building resilience and building and restoring the ecosystems. But we need evidence-based approaches, which are critical, but we also need policy and regulatory reform. I talked about the multi-stakeholder nature of the Food System Summit. The fact we've heard from constituencies that the process of these dialogues has been incredibly inclusive. And there's a concern that they don't want that inclusive dialogue to fall away after the summit process and to continue on the basis that the outcomes will be more stronger and the impact will be more stronger of those pathways if they're included. So I also know that Agnes wants to ensure that the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is adequately leveraged to deliver for food systems too. So I will close with that by thanking the organisers again for the invitation for Agnes to speak. And again, apologies she was not able to attend, but I hope this contribution provides more context for your forthcoming panel discussion. Thank you, over.
Thank you very much, Ms. Keynes, representing Dr. Agnes Calibata. Thank you for your contribution. And now we will move over to a panel conversation with some high-level policy leaders who will be discussing the outcomes of the UN Food Systems Summit and what it means for African food systems transformation. It is my pleasure to welcome the CEO and founder of Food Systems for the Future. She's equally a member of Academia 2063's Board of Trustees, Ambassador Etherine Cousin.
Well, thank you very much for that very kind introduction. And thank you to the organizers of today's event for including me as the moderator in this very important post-UN Food Systems Summit conversation. What we said from the very beginning as we planned the UN Food Systems Summit was that the work begins after the summit ends. And so these conversations are quite critical to the how we go forward. And I'm really excited about the panel that we have that's been convened for this conversation today. We have the Honorable Loban Silo, who is the Minister of Agriculture for the Republic of Malawi. We also have Mr. Jean-Claude Musabi Mama, who is the Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Agriculture and Animal Resources in Rwanda. We'll be joined through video by His Excellency Dr. Gilbert Hongbo, for the President of IFAD. We have the Vice President of Agriculture and Human and Social Development from the African Development Bank, Dr. Beth Dunford. We also have a representative from USAID, Ms. Maura Berry Boyle, who serves as the Senior Deputy Assistant Administrator and the Interim Global Water Coordinator in USAID's Bureau for Resilience and Food Security, which leads the US government's global water strategy and global food security strategy. And last, but of course, as an important participant in this conversation, is Dr. Liz Kirk, the Senior Advisor for Food Security and Commercial Agriculture at the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, FCDO, Asia Pacific. This conversation today, how we will operates from a logistical standpoint is I will first lead a moderated discussion with our representatives from Malawi and from Rwanda, followed by the institutions, beginning with the presentation from Dr. Hongbu, and then a discussion with a moderated discussion with the members of the institutional representatives. Then it's your turn. As the audience here today, we want to hear from you with your questions, and the entire panel will make themselves available to respond to those questions. You have the opportunity, of course, to include your questions in the chat box or the Q&A, and we will retrieve questions from the written questions from you, or we will, if we can, based on our time, acknowledge those who want to make an oral question as opposed to a written question. But let's see how our time runs. Let's just jump right into this conversation and start with the Honorable Minister of Agriculture from Malawi, Loban Silo. Your Excellency, we're delighted to have you here with us today. Recent studies by the Malawi Multiplier panel and also the Food Systems Transformative Integrated Policy Project have shown that Malawi is among the top African countries on course to achieve the continental agricultural policy reform and budget allocation targets. Congratulations on that monumental accomplishment. We also know that Malawi has taken quite a comprehensive approach to food systems transformation, with dedicated nutrition policies that have contributed to a marked improvement in the health and well-being of Malawians, and of course, the input subsidy program that has boosted agricultural productivity. Could you share with us, Minister, your thoughts on the recent discussions and outcomes of the UN Food Systems Summit, and what's next for Malawi? And what steps are you planning to take, is Malawi planning to take, to ensure a food systems transformation that is sustainable and equitable?
Thank you so much, moderator, Ambassador Ifarin Kaze, all excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. After weeks of engaging Malawians on the bottlenecks affecting our food systems, let me say it was even enriching to hear the global perspective on the challenges affecting the food systems at the just ended Food Systems Summit. As echoed in the statement of different countries, food remains at the core of development and our ability to achieve the sustainable development goals. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, for Malawi, the pre-summit dialogues came at the right time when the different sectors, including the agriculture sector, are in the process of re-evaluating and aligning priorities to the Malawi 2063. Malawi 2063 is our vision. That's where we are going, our direction. In this vision, Malawi aspires inclusive wealth creation and to be a self-reliant nation by 2063, where agriculture and the food systems remain key priority. We have therefore learned a lot from the pre-summit dialogues and participation at the Food Systems Summit. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, to emphasize on the key lessons learned through this process, let me echo what His Excellency, Dr. Lazarus Makafe Chakwera, President of the Republic of Malawi, said at the summit. The emphasis in his statement was that our food systems remain weak in Malawi, which is a man-made problem that can be fixed. Apart from Malawi, across the country, across the globe, this seems to be the same. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, specific for Malawi, the first challenge affecting our food systems is the poor infrastructure that hinders distribution of food. This also affects the food prices and quality, where the quality of food is further affected by post-harvest losses. Such losses also reduce the quantity of available food, hence creating double burden at the household and national levels. Adding on to this double burden is limited production and dietary diversification. The policy support on crop diversification further limits dietary diversification and the need to have integrated nutritious value chains that include indigenous foods. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as we are now in the knowledge economy, digital platforms are now taking center stage in everything. We therefore realized that we cannot rise above the food challenge if we do not integrate technology and innovation as we focus to transform our food systems. Amidst climate and pandemic shocks and stresses, digital platforms are needed for transformational agriculture and mechanization at both a small and large scale levels. All this points at the challenge of relevant research and extension services that respond to local challenges. These challenges, therefore, require holistic solutions that involve a multi-sector approach. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, realizing this, now is needed a good time to keep the momentum and implement the pathways agreed during the pre-summit dialogues. The first thing we plan to do as a country is to hold a multi-stakeholder meeting with an aim of operationalizing the pathways. This meeting will focus on both technical and financial strategies, tapping from the expertise of different stakeholders in the country. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, at the pre-summit dialogues, Malawi received commitments from development partners, the academia, civil society, the local chiefs, who are the custodians of culture and land in Malawi. Realizing that the summit generated a strong resource on food systems, we will also use this opportunity to improve our homegrown solutions to the food systems challenge. In addition, listening to the different country representations and presentations at the summit, we could hear that it would take joint effort to deal with issues that cut across borders. Thus, we plan to strengthen collaboration through regional economic communities and partnerships. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the government of Malawi remains committed to achieving the transformational agenda Since the agriculture sector is now in the process of revising the national agriculture policy and other relevant policies, the information generated from the pre-summit dialogues will be key in coming up with priorities that can advance the transformational agenda in Malawi. As we evaluate our priorities and align the sector priorities to the long-term vision that is Malawi 2063, this policy should create an enabling environment for implementing the food systems pathways. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we also recognize that the solutions to the food systems challenge cannot be the same across the country. Malawi is a country with diverse agroecological zones that require adaptive solutions. With that, we plan to use outcomes from the district dialogues to implement tailor-made solutions to the problems of different areas within the country. We will look into generating district-specific pathways that will be embedded within the district development plans. Within the decentralization policy, we will encourage resource allocation that is in line with these plans at different levels in all the districts. Allow me to appreciate sentiments made by Ephraim Kazen and Haile Mariam, former Prime Minister of the Republic of Ethiopia. Your sentiments are very encouraging. As a country, we are actually implementing affordable inputs program. With this program, Malawi is from food insecurity to bumper harvest, with surplus ready to export to whichever country is ready to import from us. I salute the vision of my state president, His Excellency Dr. Lazarus Makafe Chakwera. He emphasizes homegrown food gives people peace of mind. Homegrown food provides peace of mind and economic development. Ladies and gentlemen, in the spirit of leaving no one behind, our goal is to use multi-stakeholder approaches to deal with this complex problem, which does not have a silver bullet solution. I thank the organizers for inviting Malawi to this important event. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. And we would like to come back to you with additional questions, but let's first go to the representative from Rwanda, Mr. Jean-Claude Musabimama. And Jean-Claude, if I may say thank you again for being here today. I know Minister Geraldine was very distraught that she was unable to participate with us, but you are, of course, an able representative of the government of Rwanda and the ministry in particular. Because among African nations, Rwanda is increasingly acknowledged for its achievements in accelerating economic growth. Since 2000, the country has seen over 7.7% annual GDP growth. Key to this success is Rwanda's agricultural sector, which remains central to poverty reductions, improving livelihoods, and economic growth. Notably, the agriculture sector is estimated to have accounted for a third of overall poverty reduction between 2001 and 2011. Nevertheless, there remains challenges that leave communities vulnerable to food insecurity and malnutrition, environmental degradation, climate change, and socioeconomic shocks. With this in mind, in your view, why is it so crucial to adopt a multi-sectoral approach to tackle food systems transformation? And what are some of the biggest challenges? And how can this multi-sectoral approach be strengthened? Let's make that our first question and come back with the second question.
Thank you, moderator, and thank you for organizers for having invited us to be part of this discussion, which is very important. And here, as you said, I am representing my minister, Dr. Geraldine Mucheshimana, who was not able to attend. And coming back to the question, and about the why it's crucial to adopt a multi-sectoral approach to tackle food system transformation and other related points. First of all, in Rwanda, we know and we are aware that the food systems are first of all a sum of actors and interactions along the food value chain, which include input supply, production of crops, livelihood, fish, and other agricultural commodities to transportation, processing, retailing, wholesaling, and the preparation of food to consumption, and finally to disposal. And for this reason, it is important always to adopt a multi-sectoral approach to deal with the complexity of food systems. And this approach can respond to the triple challenges that we have in the food systems. And the first is that we have to ensure the food security and nutrition for all. The second one is that we have to provide livelihood to farmers and other actors. The third one is to ensure the sustainable environment by using natural resources sustainably and reduce greenhouse gas emission. And moreover, if we take even the preparation of the UN Food System Summit that happened in September this year, we already in Rwanda have adopted a multi-sectoral approach to tackling the food system challenges and development by designing an institutional framework to strengthen existing collaboration and coordination of policymakers, meaning line ministries, and other stakeholders, including development partners, NGOs, academia, private sector, and farmers. And this helped Rwanda to comply significantly with the guidelines provided by the UN globally. And most importantly, the process was domesticated according to the Rwandan context. And delivering on the promise of the well-functioning food systems transformation shall require a concerted effort nationally between stakeholders to show a united front in tackling the numerous food systems challenges and to promote its wide adoption. Therefore, cross-sectoral cooperation through multiple institutional structures allow the mobilization of the various available resources, including human capital, financial resources, and technical expertise to support the agriculture sector and its forward linkages. Finally, for the near future, stakeholders are now increasingly being called to be engaged in the post-summit planning, implementation, and monitoring of the food systems dialogues resolutions. And today, the ministry is currently involved in strengthening the food systems stakeholders clusters in order to be operational together with other partners, including the Tony Blair Institute, Rockefeller Foundation, AGRA, FAO, and all other stakeholders, and this in order to respond to the need of the multi-sectoral approach in order to deliver on establishing the sustainable food systems here in Rwanda. Thank you.
It's listening to you, Mr. Musa Bimama. I can understand why you embrace multi-sectoralism and the recognition of how you use all of the actors across the food system to support the work of the ministry as well as across the different government ministries. And there are many lessons that countries both in the North and the South can learn from what Rwanda has done in this space. Mr. Lowe, Your Excellency, may I ask you a quick follow-up question before I go back to the representative from Rwanda? Mr. Lowe, Your Excellency, is he still with us? Thank you. You specifically spoke about the importance of infrastructure in providing and ensuring a food system that can not only address the agricultural challenges, but to provide access to affordable, nutritious food. But we know that one of the major challenges in moving from the plans to implementation is the issue of finance. And I was quite interested to learn about Malawi's institutional overhaul of its financial sector. That has significantly raised the amount of liquidity within the food and agriculture sectors. Could you tell us a bit more about this issue of finance in Malawi?
You may wish to appreciate that when we talk of infrastructure in Malawi, we have good roads, but very few good roads that can go to the rural areas. Yet when we talk of agriculture, 80% is farmers from the rural areas, hard to reach areas. And it is these hard to reach areas that produce most of the food in Malawi. And after prioritizing production in agriculture, next issue is to engage other stakeholders. In this case, I'm talking of district councils, a Ministry of Transport and Infrastructure, to make sure that we direct some of the resources to infrastructure, so that from the rural areas, hard to reach areas, farmers can be able to transport their food to cities and towns or trading centers. The only issue we have is that engagement, collaboration. We shouldn't work just as a Minister of Agriculture. We need to engage other ministries and other stakeholders and other development partners of goodwill to make sure that there's balance. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for that response. Jean-Claude, if I may call you that, please. Rwanda has developed an extensive institutional framework that supports coordination between not just the stakeholders, but across your different ministries. And could you tell us more about how this coordination amongst the ministries, as you just heard His Excellency talk about the importance of that coordination, how that it has worked to drive the sustainable transformation of Rwanda's food and agriculture sectors?
Thank you, moderator. First of all, the Rwandan vision is to reach diverse and inclusive food systems that contribute to the national economy, always while ensuring food and nutrition security in a sustainable and resilient manner, and of course, while protecting the environment. And in practical terms, in Rwanda ministry and the agencies dealing with any element of the food systems contribute to the promotion of sustainable production and productivity of crops and livestock to ensure availability, accessibility, and affordability of safe and nutritious food. And Rwandan agriculture plans, policies, and strategies are always pre-apprised by the economic and the social clusters. And however, at each ministry level, there are regular agriculture sector working group and joint sector review meeting to increase ownership of stakeholders and accountability of implementers. And the agriculture sector working group is chaired by the Ministry of Agriculture and Animal Resources in collaboration with multiple partners to assist in the development and review of agricultural sector strategies and policies using numerous approaches, including consultation and workshops. And among others, the government of Rwanda has developed a coordination and accountability mechanism for delivery that's known as Imihigo. And Imihigo in Rwanda means the performance contract. And that means that each partner on each program has to sign a contract, a performance contract with the institutions in order to ensure a peer accountability and to ensure a transparent and an accountable governance of government program. And this accountability system aid in the timely delivery of policies and key strategies. And these performance contracts are tracked through the higher office of the Prime Minister. And for the near future, due to the inclusive stakeholder engagement in food systems, the role of performance contract should be considered as equally key to foster ownership, inclusion, and accountability to achieve the 2030 SDGs agenda. Thank you.
Ownership, inclusion, and accountability that is tracked by the Prime Minister. That's one way to get it done. We would like you to stay with us, and we're going to go to our next speaker. But we want to come back to both His Excellency from Malawi as well as to you, Jean-Claude, in our Q&A section. Our next speaker is Dr. Gilbert Hongbo from IFAD, the president of IFAD. Dr. Hongbo sends his apologies that he was not able to participate in person, but he was given a series of questions regarding IFAD's role in supporting the commitments that were made to pathways for developing a sustainable transformation of the food system, as well as supporting the most vulnerable smallholder farmers. Let's hear Dr. Hongbo's response to those questions.
Excellent. Dear colleagues and friends, I wish I could be with you in person for this important conversation. There is a huge potential for small farms to meet Africa's food needs while also generating new rural enterprises linked to food processing and distribution. Let's recall that our food is grown in rural areas where 60% of Africa's population lives. The agricultural sector employs around half of Africa's working population. But poverty is also concentrated in rural areas. Around 80% of the extremely poor are rural, not urban. Most depend on small farms for food and income. Food systems should and can be an engine of economic growth for the continent, given that agriculture contributes 27% of Africa's GDP, excluding South Africa. Yet, productivity lags compared to other parts of the world. Reflecting back on the outcomes of the Food Systems Summit, I am of the view that together we shall work with African leaders in transforming the agricultural sector, particularly in the following. First, the productivity challenge. Second, the basic food transformation. Third, the rural adaptation and mitigation, and of course, building resilience. Fourth, innovation. Fifth, ensuring minimum living income for the rural household. And sixth, access to market. Technology and innovation on one hand, as well as funding on the other hand, shall be the greatest enablers. I just don't see how we could make it happen in Africa without an intentional, serious zooming on bringing innovation and new technology affordable to rural communities. Not only is it essential for solving the productivity challenge, but also to ease the hardship and make the agriculture and food sector more attractive to the youth. Access to technology will also be required for the continent to ramp up food transformation and value addition, so to reduce the import bill and increase food exports while reducing the food loss. On the funding side, ODA alone will not be enough to transform Africa's food systems and deliver on our SDG commitment to end poverty and hunger. Consider that for sub-Saharan Africa alone, an additional 8 billion per year is needed from donor governments to end hunger, double the incomes of small-scale farmers, and limit agricultural emissions in line with the Paris Climate Agreement. Additionally, across the continent, there is a 120 billion financing gap for small and medium-sized agricultural enterprises. In bridging this gap, public development banks offer huge potential. 41 PDBs have an agricultural development mandate. Of these, nearly 1/4 are in Africa. They also and already supply significant formal financing for agriculture. And they have the potential to do much more. The new coalition of PDBs that emerged from the Food System Summit will provide a foundation for that to happen, helping them to scale up while improving their transparency. IFAD is working with partners to accelerate learning and innovation among PDBs and to ensure that targets green and inclusive finance. Transforming the agricultural sector in Africa has to be intrinsically linked to building resilience and helping small-scale farmers to better adapt to climate change while advancing as well on the mitigation front. Building farmers' capacity for resilient farming techniques, accessing technology for better weather forecasting, efficient use of fresh water, improved seeds. All these are few examples of the way forward. Ladies and gentlemen, let's not forget or underestimate the importance of data collection. Data collection to feed the policy work and to fine-tune the best practices. Finally, I would like to make a plea for continuing investment in developing the agribusiness mindset with the African youth. IFAD is determined to continue working with all partners, and in particular those important on the ground in assisting countries with implementing their national pathways. Together, we can ensure that our efforts are really inclusive and reach the last mile, addressing the need of the most marginalized and those most at risk of being left behind. Thank you.
Very much want to appreciate President and Dr. Jobert Hongbo from IFAD for those enlightening remarks that we will build upon in our next round of questions with beginning with Dr. Beth Dunford from the African Development Bank. What we'd like to do in this round is go through a quick series of questions before we bring in the audience to participate in this conversation. So Dr. Dunford, if we can begin with you. Dr. Dunford, ensuring food system transformation requires, I think you will agree, delivering increased and intensified food production and access to more nutritious foods, and while also increasing farmers' incomes. You've heard Jobert speak to all of these different issues, and so did the representatives from our countries. But we also know that farmers must adapt to the environment's impact from our climate crisis. So what are the policies that are necessary and the interventions that are required that the African Development Bank leads upon in order to support the transformation of the food system during this period of time of challenge, as I've identified through these questions, and with the big goals that we've put forward by countries of supporting not just the environment, but access to affordable, nutritious food and healthier, nutritious food, as well as increasing farmer incomes. How does the African Development Bank strategies support farmers and governments in their achievements of these pathways forward?
Well, thank you very much, Ambassador Cousins, for this question. And I'd like to stand on existing protocol. And I'm really happy to be here today. When we're discussing the outcomes of the Food System Summit, we really have to make sure, I think if we've all been saying here, that the Food System Summit comes out, concrete actions come out of it, and concrete actions on the ground in Africa that are really going to make a difference. We know that, Africa's got huge agricultural potential. And we know that the size of Africa's food market could reach $1 trillion by 2030. And so the potential is huge, but Africa, we cannot eat potential. And what Africa does with its agriculture in the face of climate change will really determine the future of food for all of us. And so we know that over 200 million Africans go to bed hungry every night. And this has to change. And so to unlock Africa's agricultural potential, I want to talk about three things today. One was technologies, climate resilience, and also financing. So first on technologies, since the African Development Bank launched its Feed Africa strategy in 2015, more than 74 million people are benefiting from improved access to improved technologies. So our Technologies for African Agricultural Transformation Program, or TAT as we like to call it, is really helping to drive this success. So TAT's impact has been significant. Food production has expanded by more than 12 million metric tons, and TAT has reduced food imports worth $814 million. So that's really impact at scale. Second, I want to talk about climate resilience. We know that only 4% of global emissions come from Africa. So when you want to address climate in Africa, you have to talk about adaptation. And we know that 2/3 of the continent depend upon agriculture for their livelihood. And the relationship between climate and agriculture is obvious. So when agriculture has really got to be central to the climate adaptation agenda, and it is, but it isn't always. So we're making progress on that. And through TAT, this is just one of many examples. Heat-tolerant wheat varieties are reaching some 1.8 million hectares in Ethiopia, Sudan, and 6 other countries. In Southern Africa, 5.2 million households are growing drought-tolerant maize on 840,000 hectares. And through the Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program, the African Development Bank and the Global Center for Adaptation plan to provide digital climate advisory services to more than 40 million farmers. So this is the kind of scale and climate resilience Africa needs to rapidly feed itself. But we need more resources to scale up TAT for Africa, and we need more resources to support climate adaptation in Africa, which brings me to my third point that I think President Hongbo very eloquently discussed, and that's financing. We must deliver food security at scale in Africa, and for that, Africa needs a lot of financing. The bank and the International Fund for Agricultural Development recently held a high-level dialogue where African heads of state and global leaders agreed to create the financing facility for food nutrition in Africa to help food systems adapt to climate change and build back better and stronger after COVID-19. This is also indicated, this financing facility is called for in the AU common position that we heard about earlier. So this is really important. It's called for by Africa, and we have to fund it for Africa. So the target for the facility is $1 billion, and it aims to bring modern agri-tech to millions more farmers, double major crop yields, produce enough food to feed an additional 200 million people, reduce incidence of hunger dramatically. The financing facility brings together a mix of tools, partners, and places to get the unfinished business of transforming African agriculture done. So it will use a variety of instruments, including loan guarantees and grants to accelerate this transformation. It will lend directly to governments through sovereign loans with a one-to-one match. It will lend to the private sector with it'll have de-risking mechanisms and the like to really unlock a 1-to-3 ratio financing from the private sector. It'll provide grants to development organizations, research organizations to really strengthen government capacity and work in that policy element you were talking about. So I think that importantly also this facility will focus investments in areas that are deemed too risky in a lot of sectors. And we know that we can be successful in those areas. So the bank president called for this facility at the UN Food Systems Summit. And we hope that the standing up this facility and the funding of this facility be one of the major outcomes going forward. Thank you.
Well, we thank you very much for those remarks, and you underscore many of the things we've already heard from the other speakers, specifically around the need for innovation and to support the transformation and financing. And that question of financing is one that we'd like to come back to in our conversation as we go forward. But first, let's go to Ms. Moore-Berry Boyle from USAID and to hear from a donor country, one of our donor countries represented here today. What do the outcomes of the UN Food Systems Summit mean for the African food systems transformation from a USAID perspective? Ms. Boyle?
Sorry, having trouble with my button here. Thank you, Ambassador Cousins. And just let me say thank you also to, just to start out and really give a thank you to the whole team at Academia 2063, as well as the Malawi Montpellier panel and everyone who's organized this really important conversation. I mean, so many great things have been said already. I think, in terms of your question, I think one of the things to really focus on is the issue of finance that has been discussed, as Dr. Dunford was just underscoring how important that is. And really, that question of mobilizing finance is so critical for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think it was mentioned earlier, the commitment that the US made at the UN Food Systems Summit is an important step. But it's one step, right? We know that the businesses are really key to the supply of inputs and account for the bulk of food aggregation, transport, processing, marketing, and retailing. And we've heard from a lot of the speakers today how important small and medium enterprises are to seeing a change. So really looking at the investment that is needed to support small and medium enterprises or SMEs. We're looking at about $36 billion of an investment shortfall each year, $36 billion. So really recognizing that, and also the impact that has been discussed that these small and medium enterprises are facing because of the COVID pandemic, as well as challenges not only in financing, but as has already been discussed in terms of technical assistance, technical advisory services that are needed to really help these businesses reach their potential and and ensure that they can be resilient, right, in the face of shocks. So I think, as noted by the IFAD president earlier, there's a huge gap here, and it's a gap that donors can't fill alone. So we really need to look at innovative mechanisms and partnerships, particularly with private sector investors. So policy dialogues that are happening between SMEs and governments and investors are really going to be essential to address many of the barriers that we see SMEs facing, as well as strengthening the ecosystem on how African businesses and investors can leverage investment opportunities on the continent. And, looking at how we can support SMEs by providing smaller, much smaller debt deals, which are what many agricultural SMEs need, right? How to get access to that. And these types of deals can allow SMEs to produce food on their for their local communities, so that they can buy local from local farmers and provide local employment opportunities. And so while many of the activities that the US is supporting under the Feed the Future initiative support SMEs, I wanted to just give one example of that work, and that is with a group called Asili Africa. And they're working to bridge the financing gap by incentivizing lending and unlocking about $700 million for agribusinesses, 750 agribusinesses in East Africa, in Kenya, Rwanda, Tanzania, and Uganda. And the work that is being done by Asili Africa is focused on incentivizing the commercial lenders so that they can make impactful loans that are environmentally sustainable, that emphasize local production and markets, and really prioritize underserved populations. And these types of efforts can, boost government and investor confidence, so that ultimately that will increase private capital for Africa food systems. So with that, I'll just also take the opportunity to mention that, USAID is really committed to doubling down the amount of private sector climate finance in 20 of the most vulnerable countries. We made a commitment to that at the Climate Leaders Summit earlier this year. And through a new green recovery investment platform that we're calling GRIP, USAID is mobilized finance for climate change mitigation and adaptation, for clean energy transition and nature-based solutions to increase the resilience of development outcomes across many of the countries where we work. So I hope, Ambassador, that helps answer some of your question, but I'll pass it back to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Ms. Boyle, for for the very insightful answer and speaking specifically about the climate summit. And we have a representative from the UK here today, who Dr. Liz Kirk from FCDO, where the climate COP26 will be held next in the coming weeks. Dr. Kirk, 2021 has been nicknamed the super year, with several large global events taking place, including, as we've been discussing, the UN Food Systems Summit. And starting next week, the UK will host COP26 in Glasgow. In your view, how are these two big UN system summits linked and aligned at the procedural level? And what are the opportunities to better integrate the findings and actions from both, particularly when food and agriculture are not on the agenda at COP26?
Thank you very much, Catherine, for this opportunity, and thank you to Your Excellencies and all the other delegates for gifting your time. Great to be here, and a really timely question, as many of my colleagues get ready for some very long days and nights in the coming days in Glasgow. So I think in terms of the synergies between the two events, the UK government's lead delegate to the UN Food Systems Summit was, of course, Lord Zach Goldsmith. And when he spoke on two high-level panels at the pre-summit event in July. He also gave the UK's national statement at the September summit. He was absolutely keen to make those links between UNFSS outcomes and our COP26 ambition front and centre of his remarks. And we worked really quite hard, I think, in our COP26 presidency, including through the hosting of a joint ministerial level COP event together with Agnes Calibata as UNFSS Special Envoy, to maximise the links between outcomes and the ambition we've got for COP26. So two key strands of work. COP26 is putting nature at the heart of its response to climate change. Under our COP presidency, we're committed to jointly building a global alliance of countries who are committed to, firstly, breaking the link between commodities and deforestation. So that is work through the forest, agriculture and commodity trade, the FACT dialogues. That is ongoing to accelerate transition to more sustainable land use. We are also working with a global alliance of countries to look at how we can eliminate and redirect harmful agricultural incentives and increase incentives with positive impacts across agriculture and other sectors to accelerate a transition to sustainable agriculture. In terms of some of the initiatives that we've taken as the UK to promote maximum coherence between these two global fora, I mentioned the COP26 Ministerial Dialogue on the transition to sustainable agriculture that was held on the 15th of September. We were delighted to have Agnes join us as a keynote speaker there. At that event, ministers from partner countries were asked to endorse a policy action agenda, setting out their particular pathways to sustainable agriculture. And at COP26 on Nature Day, there'll be two high-level events in the morning to announce the ambitions and actions by member states and other stakeholders that result from that process. So far, it's an ongoing process, so do watch out for that on Nature Day. And in terms, I think, of the UK's own actions within its food system, those have been set out in the UK's national pathway document that we've submitted to the National Dialogues, part of the UNFSS work stream, so you can see that online. Key initiatives that we've thought to profile in our UNFSS input, but also in our COP26 Sustainable Agriculture commitment, commissioning of an independent review by Sir Henry Dimbleby on how we can make our food system fit for the future, success in reducing the volume of wasted food in the country by more than a fifth, and that was between 2007 and 2018, and our commitment to the UN goal to halve food waste by 2030 domestically, and significant initiatives which have been taken to make land use subsidies contingent on good environmental stewardship domestically, as well as bringing in legislation to get illegal deforestation out of UK supply chains. So those are the areas of synergy and overlap that we've really sought to maximise through our presidency, but also through our input to the Food Systems Summit. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Dr. Kirk. There are so many questions I could ask you in response to that, but I want to be mindful of our time and our other speakers, but stay on this issue of climate and the COP in particular, and go back to Dr. Dunford and ask you a question, Dr. Dunford. The bank is spearheading efforts to mobilize, increase private sector financing for climate change. Could you tell us about this, how this is being implemented, and how your partnerships are evolving around this goal? And how does a bank mobilize other financial institutions as well as the private sector to increase their investments in green and clean energy, for example?
Great. Thank you so much for the question. I think I'm going to take it in a couple of different ways, if that's all right. First, I wanted to talk about getting access to finance for women in agriculture. And, because they are a very big part of what you're talking about here. We know that only 23% of African women have access to credit. And the gender wage gap we know is 74%. And the loss from gender inequality and wealth is estimated at $2.5 trillion. And the financing gap for women in the agricultural value chain is estimated at $15.6 billion. So for us to really get at this food system transformation, this climate adaptation we're thinking, we need to make sure that women are financed to be a part of it, and we can leverage funds for that. So, and this is because women are the primary producers of food in Africa. And it's hard because women, we know, have fewer assets than men, run small agribusinesses in the informal sector that can't really access finance. So the bank's Affirmative Finance Action for Women in Africa initiative focuses on reducing this financing gap. And by 2026, the bank is going to facilitate up to $5 billion of financing to women businesses on the continent. including those operating in the agriculture sector. So there are two parallel channels here. One is a strategic use of the bank's existing financial instruments, of which there are many. There are lines of credit, there's trade finance, there's equity investments, loans to companies, et cetera. And then secondly, there's also the FAWA Guarantee for Growth, which is an innovative guarantee mechanism that's coupled with financial assistance that de-risks women in the SME sector and further incentivizes financial institutions to lend to women entrepreneurs. So one example is in Ghana, where we've got a $20 million FAWA financing climate resilient agricultural practices initiative that's expected to benefit 400 women-led micro, small, and medium enterprises. And that translates into 370,000 beneficiaries through a line of credit at EcoBank Ghana. So importantly, this line of credit, this risk guarantee comes with technical assistance, which is really important. The technical assistance will help women to make their companies more bankable, providing them with business development services, financial services, et cetera, but also really working with the banks to help them design products that actually meet the needs of women. So not just making sure that women are bankable, but making sure that banks and financial institutions are womenable, and being able to get them access, really comes on both sides on the supply and demand, making sure that we can get women enterprises in the agro-industrial space, and so that they can really focus on climate adaptation in their small and medium enterprises. So I think that these types of innovative mechanisms, bringing finance to women in climate adaptation, are the way we need to go. Thanks.
Fantastic, Dr. Dunford. You've given us so much to think about here. First, the $8 billion that you are mobilizing in support of agricultural transformation, and now the work that you are performing to support women farmers. This is significant in actualizing the goals, and because, as you said, you can't eat potential. And so over to you, Ms. Boyle. At the UN Food Systems Summit, the U.S. committed and pledged $10 billion to promote food systems transformation through innovation and climate smart agriculture, both in the U.S. and abroad. I believe it's divided 50-50 between $5 billion in the U.S. and $5 billion in development investments. And this is a tremendous example of major scale up and strong leadership. How does the USAID to ensure that the investments are made in alignment with and in support of the African development strategies, and particularly the pathways that were put forward by African countries during the Food Systems Summit?
Thank you to Ambassador Cousins for that question. And, I think, yes, that commitment by President Biden, $10 million was really a strong signal of U.S. support for sustainable and resilient food systems. So, and half of that funding, as you pointed out, will go towards bolstering global food security internationally, with a very significant focus on Africa. And then also, we know that President Biden reinforced the U.S. government's commitment to tackling climate crisis with a promise to work with Congress to double our public international climate financing by $11.4 billion annually by 2024. So, big promises there. And, at USAID, something that was discussed earlier, and I'd like to underscore is, really having that focus that the most productive and resilient food systems are those that are locally led, inclusive, and accountable to their populations. And you pointed that out when our guest from Rwanda talked about ownership, inclusion, and accountability. And so that is something that, USAID and the US government are committed to, and really committed to aligning our investments in the African agenda to achieve food systems transformation. I mean, I was pleased to be able to participate back in the AGRF in Nairobi and see some of the works that was going into, in collaboration with the AU, of pulling together that process. So following the Food Systems Summit, we remain committed to really the objectives that were expressed in the African Common Position. focused on achieving the continent's food security goals. So I wanted to highlight just a couple of areas, if I may. And first, one is that we'll work with our African partners to strengthen the business enabling environment. We'll do this through policy and regulatory reforms, which can attract private sector investment and aim to level that playing field for the smallholder farmers. And then second, support an improved digital ecosystem, something that other speakers have been talking about as well. And that expands access to data and digital tools for key populations like the smallholder farmers. And this includes the African Union's continent-wide effort under CATA to strengthen local data systems across its 55 member states. And we're glad to see the global community's commitment to high quality data, notably through the 50 by 2030 initiatives. It's also critical that we promote greater African ownership of data solutions. And this will align data, resources, and systems to ensure that we can meet Africa's needs. And then just lastly, the US is working to advance a coordinated effort to mitigate and adapt to climate change together with the international community. So just last week, if I can highlight, the AUC and USAID launched a new partnership to implement the Paris Agreement for climate action in Africa. And through this innovative partnership, USAID is providing support to the AUC and to pilot countries to help implement their nationally determined contributions and their national adaptation plans. And also really pleased to support the global initiative, Agricultural Innovation Mission for Climate, what is being called AIM4C. That initiative is aiming to increase investment in innovation research and development on agriculture and food systems in support of climate action. So AIM4C, we're calling on all partner countries to join this initiative and increase investment in research that advances climate smart agriculture and food systems technology. And we look forward to a lot more discussion on AIM4C next week. I think we'll hear a lot more about that at the COP26. So just a few more comments to say that looking ahead, the US has newly launched the Global Food Security Strategy, which I think everyone probably on this call has been a part of helping us work on. And that is going to build on the lessons that we learned over our long history of working in food security while refining our efforts to address the emerging challenges that are in front of us. And the revised strategy will be implemented in alignment with Africa's own strategies to promote agricultural-led growth and improve nutrition, increase resilience, focus on the issue of inclusion. And indeed, the input of our African partners was super instrumental in informing objectives and priorities of this revised strategy. So welcome the ongoing dialogue with the diverse array of African stakeholders, particularly women, youth, and marginalized groups. So thank you.
Thank you very much for that very insightful response. And if we start adding up the commitments, the $5 billion from the US, the $8 billion from the African Development Bank, we're getting closer to that $80 billion that's one of our keynote speakers noted is necessary for the transformation on the continent. And as we talk about that 80 billion, the issue of the $100 billion that was committed by donor countries to supporting adaptation was raised by one of our earlier keynote speakers, Dr. Kirk. As we are on the continent today and hosted by the leadership here, the question I must ask you is, what efforts will FCDO and the UK government be making to mobilize investments into strengthening the resilience of African food systems?
Sure, thank you very much, Esrin. So I think an absolute top priority for our COP presidency this year has been to encourage countries on multilateral development banks to collectively meet the commitments of delivering that US 100 billion. The latest report published on Monday by the COP presidency, based on OECD analysis, is showing us that developed countries will make significant progress in meeting this target and will likely meet that in 2023 and increase this further by 2025. Not all countries have announced their latest pledges, however. We hope those to be announced in the remainder of the year. In terms of the UK itself, we have committed to doubling our spend on international climate finance to 11.6 billion in the next 5 years, and 3 billion of that will support outcomes on nature and the environment, including through agriculture. So these investments will help the most vulnerable people, including farmers, adapt and build resilience to the impacts of climate change. We also monitor our international climate finance, and to date, those programs supported under that funding strand have supported 66 million people to better cope with the effects of climate change. And there's been an avoidance of 31 million tonnes of greenhouse gas emissions. That report is available online if people want to look under the hood. And our agriculture portfolio has been quite key in the achievement of those results through interventions such as promoting drought resilience crops, irrigation systems, agricultural extension.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kirk, for that very enlightening response. We have about 20 minutes left in our program for today, and I'd like to go to the questions. We do have questions from the audience. And so I'd ask each responder to limit your responses to 2 minutes, to give us an opportunity to pose as many of the questions as we have received. The first question indeed is to His Excellency Loban Silo from Malawi. Your Excellency, if you can turn your camera back on, please. So I am going to go on to the next question. And this question is to any of the next question is directly to USAID. It suggests that can USAID commit to funding more of agriculture and climate-focused research in Africa? A lot of resources have been channeled to development work through contractors. This leads to short-term projects that have no sustainability. How, Ms. Boyle, would you respond to that question?
Thank you, Ambassador. That's a great question, and something I think we're going to hear more about next week, actually, at COP26. Certainly investments in agricultural research, we know are so important. So, and working, as I said earlier, working with local partners is hugely important to USAID. As an agency, it's a priority of USAID to focus on what we're calling localization. And, we work a lot with national level research institutions through various mechanisms. Of course, the CGIAR is an important partner of the global community and especially of USAID. A great question and something we're always working towards doing better in terms of our partnerships with nationally based and regionally based research institutions working on agriculture and climate change. And I would say just listen in, tune in next week, and you'll hear more from us on that.
Well, thank you very much. And we will tune in. I'm headed off to Glasgow on Monday, so look forward to hearing more. The next question is to anyone on the panel who would like to answer, and it specifically asks, Agenda 2063 for Africa is up to now is not yet well popularized and published, especially to local farmers at the grassroots. What do you think should be the answer to getting farmers more in line with the goals of Agenda 2063? I'd first go to Jean-Claude Musa Bimama from Rwanda to speak from the government perspective. Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, thank you, moderator. I think for our case, I cannot say that farmers are not aware of the Agenda 2063. Why? Because all the strategies, agricultural strategies we are implementing here in Rwanda are always articulated to all the global framework that you have and the African commitment that you have, including the Agenda 2063. And we are implementing agriculture policies strategy through the Plan Stratégique de Transformation Agricole now in Rwanda. And that strategic plan is always there for always, it's always a 7-year program. And that program is always, is always connected with all the global and regional commitments of our country. And for the farmers, I think the main is not to know that what they're doing is the Agenda 2063, because this is not what is important. What is important is the actions that are related, that are formulated just to deliver on the agenda. And in our case, all the activities we are implementing are always articulated with those commitments and to those framework that guides always our planning, that always go from grassroots up to the national level. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question, and I'd invite other panelists to ask questions as well, that is one that is posed to all members of the panel. So I'd ask you all to turn your cameras on and each take about 2 minutes to answer this question. The widely accepted principle is that the food system transformation is not about creating new institutions, but rather bringing together the existing ones to collaborate and partner better with governments. What, in your opinion, are the incentives, instruments, mechanisms to put in place to make this collaboration happen better than in the past? Let's begin with you, Dr. Kirk.
Gosh, it's a great question, isn't it? And I think if I could answer that, I could solve the world's problems. I think what you've got to do is incentivize in the right way. Yeah, and I think too often our institutions, for all sorts of understandable reasons, access to resources, etc., there can be an element of competition. So making sure that we are setting the right task holistically and then incentivizing people to need each other, to need the inputs of each other, to work together to then achieve that vision, is obviously the way that we're going to have to do it. That said, it's much easier to say that than to do that, isn't it? Yeah. In a messy world in which there are, shocks and rapidly changing circumstances. Mm-hmm. That would be my answer. Set the right task and then set the incentives right so that people are rewarded for working together rather than set up to compete against each other for resource.
And I'd ask the same question to you, Ms. Boyle. What do you think we need to do better to collaborate? You've heard from Liz about what she thinks, and we heard from Mr. Musabiyama earlier that how the Rwandan ministries collaborate to achieve the transformation. What do you think is necessary from the donor's perspective of how donors could work better with institutions like the development banks, as well as with governments that are recipients of resources and support from the USAID?
Thank you, Ambassador, for that. It is a great question, and I think we're all on the same page that we need strong institutions, and there's many that exist across the continent, including academia. 2063 that's hosting this event. So we need strong institutions, right? We need accountability mechanisms. I think that's really important. We need transparent policy agendas. Those are critically important if we're going to see food systems transformation. And we really need a commitment to mutual accountability to help countries, coordinate country governments, to coordinate with the private sector to ensure that civil society is involved, and that, we can develop policies around food security targets in this way. I think we really, as was mentioned earlier in some of the opening remarks, Africa has made progress over the past couple of decades, but right now we're facing so many challenges. And we really need to accelerate that agricultural-led growth to see the food systems transformation. So I think one of the things that stands behind that commitment to transparency is really the ability to fight corruption. That will help us promote transparent and accountable use of resources that I think is so important. And we recognize that in sub-Saharan Africa, that agricultural growth rate, that is a testament to the commitments that are there, that are embodied in the Maputo and Malabo, and to programmatic implementation through CADP and other mutually accountable processes that are already in place, that have brought together so many stakeholders. And, we heard also from Malawi, the work that they have planned to do, country level stakeholder engagements. I think, the willingness of actors and institutions to really work collectively in setting shared targets for achieving development outcomes and managing that progress towards reaching the goals of ending hunger and reducing poverty are really important. So I think as a donor, USAID, we see our role in being able to help step in and facilitate some of the access to solutions and information, and helping make it available to various stakeholders, such as was discussed earlier, like how do we get that out to farming communities? How do we share that with businesses? And that includes continued support to CADP and to the biannual review. So I'll just throw that in there. Thanks for the opportunity to answer that.
Of course.
Sorry to go on too long.
No. Let me go back over before we close on this question to Dr. Dunford, who posed this question, and say, you've heard from colleagues from the donor countries. How would you, as leader in a multilateral development bank, answer that same question?
I think my colleagues on this panel have said it well. We need strong institutions. We need to work on policy. We need to ensure that there's, collaboration amongst everything that we're doing. But the reality is we need more of everything. So it's not a competition for space. It's a yes and to make sure that it's actually working together on the ground. And I think that, we think the financing facility for food nutrition in Africa called for by African leaders is a way to really sort of scale up that financing to really, pull different types of financing together, sovereign, non-sovereign, grants, et cetera, to really make a big difference. But we need it all, right? We need innovation. We need innovative ideas. We need policy reform. We need technical assistance. We need, infrastructure. And I think, so there are structures that, and facilities that we need to be put in place, building on the ones we have, creating new ones where we need to. But really what we need is to pull together actors with financing around innovation and ideas that make things happen on the ground. I'm just going to give one example. This is just one of many of, we're working with the government of Nigeria to stand up a special agro-industrial processing zone to really bring and incentivize, lower the cost for businesses to come in and invest in value addition, aggregation, processing in 8 sites around Nigeria. And what the concept is much like an economic zone, that you bring together the infrastructure that is needed in one place. In this case, it's in areas of high agricultural production. And you bring the roads, the electricity, the water, et cetera, together, coupled with policy incentives. And it makes it cheaper for businesses to invest. So the government's investing in this, we're investing in this, private sector actors are coming in to invest, different funds. So again, we've got over $500 million coming together to invest in these industrial zones, the agro-industrial zones, in 8 sites. And people are just coming together around this really great idea. So I think it's a combination of ideas, action, institutions to really fuel to make things happen. We need it all.
We need it all. What a way to close on that question, recognizing everything that's been said by the other members of the panel in response to that question. We have one last question that I'd like to ask Mr. Musa Bimama. It's from Francois Stepman about what is Rwanda's food technology capacity priorities to innovate, for instance, for producing pre-cooked beans, tasteful, affordable, and fast to cook, sweet potato chips, etc. Knowing that your country that you just concluded the 12th Africa Day for Food and Nutrition Security.
I didn't catch you well. Can you repeat it?
I'm sorry. I was asking what the just concluded 12th Africa Day for Food and Nutrition Security talked about strategic directions for promoting increased production and processing of nutrient-rich traditional African foods. In that regard, I was asking you the question of what is Rwanda's food technology capacity priorities to innovate, for instance, producing pre-cooked beans, sweet potato chips, etc.
Thank you. It's how to say? I may say that it's a question not easy to respond, as our industry, our agro industry, is still at the early stage, and many of the technologies are still to be developed, and it's very complicated to say the priority has to be this and this. But what we started with in Rwanda, we started with promoting how to say process the food to increase, to tackle and to deal with the malnutrition among children and pregnant women. And we have a big industry of Africa, Improve the Food, where we produce food just for children and for pregnant women, as it's a priority just to deal with the issue of malnutrition and stunting. But all kind of processing industry for food are equally important here in Rwanda, according to the market and according to the needs, as our industry is still at the early stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Musa Bimama. The reality of that answer that you just gave us builds on the statements, the interventions that were made by the other panelists regarding the need for innovation, capacity building, financing, and support to governments and small and medium-sized industries. So you've given us a great example of how those concepts can support processing in Rwanda, but across the continent, to ensure that the transformation is not just on the farm, but from the farm to the consumer. So I very much appreciate that answer. I want to thank each one of our panelists for the rich responses that you've presented to us today. I think we all benefited from the knowledge that you brought and the information that you shared. This is the beginning of this dialogue in the commitment that the global community has made, not just to the transformation, but a just transformation, which must include bringing Africa and every smallholder farmer, as well as the communities that are served through the food system and particularly access by consumers to more nutritious food, as part of the transformation as we move forward. With that, I hand back over to Ousmane Badiane to close us out.
Thank you very much, Earthurin. This was an amazing tour de force, and I very much appreciate the rich debate. Again, thank you for those who gave their time to us today. Minister Lowe, Permanent Secretary Musa Bimama, President Humbo, Vice President Danforth, Senior Deputy Assistant Administrator, Maura Berry-Boyle, Senior Advisor, Liz Kirk, and of course, those who gave the keynotes from Commissioner Sako to Prime Minister Haile Mariam and Joachim von Braun. Thank you for joining us. This was a very rich debate. It's hard to say anything in addition to what we really heard here, but just very little, tiny, short, brief reflections. We all see the Food Systems Summit and its post-agenda as an opportunity to act on the urgency and the need to do more and better than we've done in the past. We have heard from the rich debate here the importance of things like governance, like investment, finance, including for the private sector, especially for the excluded actors. And I really liked the focus on finance and SME and gender, because that's where they come together. Our emerging processing sector is dominated by female entrepreneurs. 90% of them processing cassavas, the millet, the sorghum, the white maize, and what have you. They are the underfunded as well. They are those with a very limited access to technology to innovate products and processes. So I think that's really where all those come together: inclusion, empowerment, financing, and private sector development. Of course, we talked about climate adaptation as well, technology and data. All those are extremely important, the emphasis on smallholder farmers. I like the last bit of the discussion about coordination. And I think here, I heard it from USAID, I heard it from Liz Kirk, and I heard it also from the AFDB. How we come together and work together to deliver for Africa requires alignment around and support to and enhancement of the African agenda itself, around the Malabo and the Carib agenda and the Agenda 2063. But for that to happen, what we heard today from Minister Lowe, and heard it as well from Permanent Secretary Musa Bimana, is the leadership of the African countries. They have to lead this agenda. They have to step up, they have to scale up, they have to meet the commitments, and we've seen from these two countries that are doing it. If they do that and do more of it, then the development partners will have to come and align around that. That is how the coordination takes place. We work around the same goals, the same priorities, the same targets, the same activities, basically. That brings in everybody around the table to work together. If we do that, we're going to be delivering against the Food Systems Summit ambition. We'll be helping African countries rise up to the occasion and continue to implement the African agenda with the effect that we expect to see. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your thought. Thank you for being here with us today. And I would like to close perhaps the session here, unless there's something from my logistics team. I know you're talking about a photo shoot or whatever it is, group photo. Is this something you still intend to do, Lai, before we close the session?
Yes, Usman.
Okay.
We'll just kindly ask everyone to turn on their video so we can get a beautiful shot. And while waiting for everyone to turn on the video, I mean, just type one word in the chat to describe this conversation. For me, I would describe it as insightful. So just one word in the chat to tell us what this conversation represents to you. Please turn on your video so that we can get a beautiful shot before we sign out. I see Dr. Liz Craig, Rich. For me, it would be insightful. I see from Ambassador Etherin, enlightening. From John Kaganga, wonderful. From Dr. Beth Dunford, engaging. Energizing, that's from Maura Barry. Encouraging from Greenwell, Machaya. Rich from Dr. Badian. Wonderful from Honorable Lovin Lowe. Wide-ranging from Julie Collins. Keep them coming, comprehensive, wonderful again, useful, well-structured and promising. All very rich comments that we're getting. So I would ask everyone to turn on their video so we can take the picture. Galvanizing, stimulating. Great. Can we get a few more people? We need a full screen to get a good shot. Exciting, stimulating, galvanizing.
How many more videos you need for the shoot?
Okay, Nancy, please go ahead. Just take as many shots as you can. Engaging.
Let us know when you're done.
Will do.
Good on my side.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for
so
being
much.
here. Thank you very much. Ciao, ciao.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.